Good afternoon, Canisius High School community. It is Andy Deyell, your Vice President for Institutional Advancement, back with another episode of Conversations with Canisius, our regular web series where we check in with our alums all over the U.S. and see what they've been up to since their time here at 1180 Delaware and at Canisius High School. I am joined today by a very special guest all the way from Providence, Rhode Island, Dr. David Karambizi. David, how are you?
I'm well. How are you? How are you, Andy? Of
Good. Thank you for joining us today.
course.
Dr. Karambizi recently completed medical school at Brown University, where he did a dual doctorate. He's going to tell us a little bit about his research in the field of cancer in a second. But we are really thrilled to have you join us today. And so, David, take us through a little bit about your doctoral program and the program you just completed, and what you will be doing in the future with that incredible education.
Yes, yes, absolutely. Thank you so much for that question.
Sure.
Um, so I finished with the dual doctorate, but that was initially actually wasn't the intent. So I came in as an MD. That
Yeah.
by itself is complicated enough. You're trying to just get through it and then be done. And then going through it, it naturally occurred to me, because a lot of some of these events are happen organically, right? When you are open to opportunities and circumstances. And what happened as a medical student is that I went and saw a lot of patients, and I've always had a focus on oncology, on cancer care, and noticed as a medical student that um, I really needed more on the side of innovation, right? And it was born out of compassion. So I'll see a lot of patients. There will be a lot of care, but then, in my opinion, my perspective, not too much innovation. And so that's where this, I call it a positive crisis, came
Mm.
to me, where I'm almost done with medical school, and I have this overwhelming feeling that I need to learn more. So that's where the MD training after third year now turns into the MD PhD, with the PhD being that I go back and I should really focus intently on understanding intimately how cancers work and then how to develop a new set of therapy.
Right.
And what I did with that knowledge is that recently we're not working with Dr. Tinos. So this is the mentor who really opened my mind up for like the cancer research that we were doing. And so we worked together and developed a set of therapeutics now that we're using to actually now make a company. And the whole approach actually is to develop drugs that revolve around targeting what we're calling RNA modifications. But the idea is to actually target the RNA code. And what that does to cancer cells, that actually causes them to self-destruct while at the same time activating the immune system. So that's what happened, right? Initially coming as an MD, then being drawn into the lab, and then from the lab, um, organically being pushed into a space of entrepreneurship and company building. Again,
Wow.
out of necessity for patient care.
Well, I mean, we started with the end there, which is good, and we're gonna work backwards now. And you can tell us a little bit maybe later on about some of those exciting things that you're working on and different ways. And really, what it comes down to is trying to change the world, right? Make the world a better place, one day at a time. And so, but let's go back in time. You have a really incredible sort of journey on how you got to Canisius High School. And if you were a graduate of the class of 2010, that means in 2006 you're looking to come to Canisius, but you're not coming to Canisius High School in the typical path that we would see from kids all over Western New York. You're coming from another country. So, David, take us back in time and take us through sort of your journey to Buffalo and then to Canisius High School.
Yeah, absolutely. So we leave Ivory Coast. So Ivory Coast is where we were.
Yeah,
I'm originally from Rwanda. I grew up in Ivory Coast or Cote d'Ivoire. So if you're French speaking, I don't want to offend you, so I have to say Cote d'Ivoire.
that's all right.
Left Cote d'Ivoire because it became unstable. And then we came to the United States, and we Buffalo, New York. So if you're coming from basically living near the equator to Buffalo, it's quite a shock, even in terms of, I think my bodies and my cells probably revolted. I've never experienced anything like that. But I think what's important to note is that when I came, it was in 2004. And I would attend Canisius 2 years later. Again, Ivory Coast is a francophone nation. I spoke No, I think the only word I knew in English was hi, right? So that's the circumstances under which I came. And and I've heard about this place called Canisius actually during those 2 years. And I would drive by Canisius because we didn't live actually too far away from Canisius. And it looked to me like this unattainable mecca. I mean, physically, architecturally it looked good, and I was excited because I've always had this interest in architecture. And so looking at the space itself, it just really represented this incredible symbol. And I had a feeling that and a conviction that if actually I could step into that place, this would be an inflection point for my life, and really would bring about major change. So, but that's when we arrived in 2004. And in 2006 really had this dream of, it really was a dream. And as you said, for some people maybe it's expected. For me, I still remember the day when I had my letter, because it was really much of a reach school.
Sure.
uh, Canisius, yes.
And what were some of the things? So your experience, your 4 years at Canisius, tell me about some of the takeaways. Tell me about some of the things you learned, not only about yourself, but about other people and sort of what inspired you to attend eventually Cornell University.
Yes, yes, absolutely. I think what's great about Canisius, and I call it an inflection point on purpose. It really is a life-changing experience of attending Canisius. And there are two reasons here why I would say that. So one reason is the education itself, which was absolutely fantastic, right? And I learned really what I call the pillars of pedagogy, which make you really in some way a force for good, right? And those pillars for me, and they sound basic, but they're really important, right? It's learning how to write well, read well, and then ultimately the art of articulation itself, and speak well. But doing those three things indicates or denote that you have clear thinking. But this is a place where you're learning to write well, read well, speak well, and really learn how to think. And this was really critical. So that was the educational piece that gave me the tools to then be ready for a place like Cornell. Because you have to imagine that coming here in 2004, then going to Canisius, then from Canisius to college, it's not a lot of time to adjust and be ready, and then to go face a place where you have really the best of the best academically in one place. You had to have had an incredible foundation. And I think from a learning and educational perspective, Canisius set that incredible foundation to the point that I would say that to me, Canisius was harder than Cornell. And it may sound odd, but it was. And the second part of what was important that I learned at Canisius is that, and I still employ it, and it's what we say all the time, men for others, right? Because the MD, the PhD, the company that we're building, uh, the pedagogy, all of these are tools. That's really what they are. They're tools. The question is, where do you direct those tools? And I think that now, even in these days, for in society in general, there's a little bit of a loss of where to direct that tool, which we call people call purpose. I think from a young age at Canisius, we're not just educated, but we're told already that the very purpose of all this tool is service and is to serve others. So I think those two things were great. It's being equipped with the education, which is fantastic, but then being told already, this is how you will use it. And it happened for me that I had this natural aptitude for biology and sciences. So it made sense to use what I was very good at, biological sciences and innovation, but then use it for service. So the company, the degrees, all of it is really very much focused on patients and then making innovations that would transform people's lives. That's it. Yeah.
That's a great answer. Tell me, as far as influences on the faculty and staff, who are some of or your early influences at Canisius, people that sort of inspired you this way?
Oh, absolutely. There are so many, right? So, and there's this beautiful African saying, and I love it very much. I always say it to myself to remember. And so my ancestors say, look, if you want to go fast, you go alone, which it makes sense. You can go fast if you're alone because you don't have a lot of weights, and a lot of dependencies. But if you want to go far, you go together.
Mm.
That's really beautiful, and the aspect of perceiving life as a marathon, right? A long distance take. And it really does take a collective of individuals at every point to really pour into you and to direct you. And Canisius was that. And I will go through, there are so many, but I'll go through some names and tell you what they did for me. There was Father Guzik, who was incredible. So, to my wife's dismay, he introduced me to philosophy. So, I'm going around the house still philosophizing, and she's like, "Okay, come on, David." Uh, so Father Guzik introduced me to really hardcore philosophy, and I love that he didn't hold back. He didn't look at me and say, "Look, he's only in XY grade." No, he really pushed me in terms of Thomas Aquinas, Aristotelian philosophy. We really went in great depth, and what that does to a young man is really incredible, right? In terms of growth and also confidence. So that's Father Guzik. Those Father Zanoni, who really was a spiritual mentor, who just stood as a model
Mm.
of the embodiment of a person you want to be like. That's Father Zanoni. And he still is this giant in my mind, and will continue to be for as long as I live. Now, when I see him, I'm even afraid to hug him. I'm like, okay, let's, So that's Father Zanoni, and there was Father Betty, who really exemplified for us service. And he just did so much for us. And by us, it's not just me. I think there's a collective of us that remember what Father Betty did for us. There was Mr. Zera, who really was a huge influence for me. In terms of what he gave me, really was confidence, and I still carried it. It was the first time that somebody looked at me intently and communicated to me my STEM ability. And
Yeah.
prior to that, I had not thought about it. And so this is really fundamental to everything that I would do then and the kind of confidence I would develop. And then finally, and then absolutely not least, is Miss Turpak. And I won't say too much about Miss Turpak, other than that she really was, for me, a mother figure. And you can imagine that you're coming, you don't speak English, and you're coming in a school that is also predominantly white, and so forth, so on. And so you need really to have this feeling of family. And when I went there she was, blonde, blue eyes.
Mm.
I felt like this is family, and this is a mother to me. And so these are really the names that I can say were influential, but there are so many other people, Mr. Wanzer, and it goes on and on and on. But these are really the key
All
individuals.
great people and a lot of familiar names, believe it or not, David. I had several of those people were very influential in my life as well when I was a student here, 30 some years ago. So it's great to hear those names, and I'm not surprised at all.
Yeah.
And so you graduate from Canisius in 2010. As I mentioned earlier, you go on to Cornell University, Ivy League institution. As you said earlier, best of the best. What were some of the lessons that maybe that you took from Canisius? You mentioned some things that you learned along the way, but how did you learn? How did you use your Canisius education not only in at Cornell, but then at Brown and now in your professional life? What are some takeaways and lessons that you find yourself, relying on even as an adult now?
Yes, absolutely. I think few things. One is organization. That was important because you have to be, and then uh, it just is an important skill for leading a company, for leading a household, right? Co-leading with my wife, for really every facet of life. So it was, we had these. I think Canisius was the first time that I was given this a planner. We
Yeah.
walked here. You have to have a planner, and that's fundamentally really important, and it has stayed with me. I mean, to this day, I that's the first thing I do. I open a planner and I plan the day, the year, the month,
Yeah.
microseconds, etc. So the organization aspect is really important. And then the other part that was really, really important at Canisius is that I learned was tenacity. Right, you have to stick with the work. And in some ways, people describe, even if you use some terms, that really, when you think of a genius, people think, oh, this is an outlandish person who is coming up with these outlandish, exotic, esoteric thoughts that the rest of us cannot have. But actually, some people describe it as the ability to stick longer to a problem.
Mm.
most people really wouldn't want to stick with. So that is what I learned at Canisius also. It's the tenacity to stick with it. Just keep coming back and keep coming back, and eventually you will get it. Because as I started, there was clearly um, in terms of ability, there was a differentiation, right? And even linguistically, but I learned that if you really stick to it, you can achieve great results. And then lastly, and really importantly, which I still have, is the joy of learning. And I think this is really important. You have to enjoy it, right? Even
Sure.
in building the company, at the med school, in the PhD process, and maybe sometimes it could be annoying to some individuals, and probably some people in my class were looking at me thinking, "Okay, this is a strange fella." But I really made it a point to enjoy anatomy, to enjoy my learning, because to learn and to absorb and to internalize and take information and make it your own and grow, it really is it's an incredible experience. So I think that I learned that at Canisius and I carried on. I really, and it was tough, but it was also very joyful to develop these therapeutics, um, to think deeply, to learn about myself at every stage. So those are the things, and I really would say that that particular one is actually the most important to me, is
Hmm.
that you really have to find a way to enjoy it. And if you think about the greats in any sport, Messi, Michael, Jordan, so forth, so on, you do see that there is an intensity which is also matched with an enjoyment. That have You have to enjoy while being intense. I'm absolutely very intense in the calling and the work,
Sure.
but I also have a lot of fun at the same time. So
Those are great pieces of advice for our young alums and our old alums. I mean, everybody really who's out there trying to make their way in the world. So thank you for sharing that. And as you look to the future, David, you're working on some really exciting stuff. Like, tell us a little bit about, I know you said you're building a company now. I mean, right out of this program, tell us a little bit about what it is you're trying to accomplish and where you see yourself, maybe 5, 10, 15, 20 years from now. I know it's a big question, but I also have had the, advantage of talking to you before and knowing a little bit about you and sort of how your mind works and some of the things that you're working on. And you are a guy, like you just mentioned with your planner, whether it's a day, a week, a month, a year, you're a guy that looks forward. So tell us a little bit about your vision for sort of what it is that you're trying to do, and your timeline for that.
yes, absolutely. So first, we're building as a collective, but it's the beautiful part is that it's born out of a mentorship, right? Because this is being built out of the Tapinos lab. So I had the great privilege of being educated by really a scientist that I think is top 1% of the top 1%. So this is Dr. Nikos Tapinos. And so we have this partnership, and we're going together to build this company. And I think that we both, as founders of this company, we're really and passionate and very dedicated to the patient. That's the first part, and that's the long-term vision, which again is rooted in these tenets and these thoughts of man if you to be inclusive and woman for others. So that's the first part. Now the technology that we are building is, again, as I said, is targeting RNA modifications. So I won't get into the technical detail, but the idea is to actually manipulate and target the RNA code
Yeah.
for the first time. On one of the really the pioneer, uh, one of the pioneering companies in this space. And then what you're able to do is actually in a very neat way control how RNA functions and works in various disease states. And this technology, why it's so exciting, has implications in multiple fields. So you can apply it in metabolic disorders, neurodegenerative disease, Alzheimer's, Huntington, so forth, so on. We started with oncology because we have this human connection to it. It's a major unmet need, and we think that this particular technology that's RNA based can be extremely transformative in that space where there's a need for innovation. So we're starting there. So that's about the company, and because it's also in stealth mode, that's
Yeah.
as much as I can say
Sure. Sure.
without getting in trouble. And we're really excited, and more will come out quite soon. And our hope really is to have therapies available for patients as quickly as possible. And the beauty of the whole structure of the company is that it's not a single asset company. We actually also have an AI team, which we've been working with for a very long time. Right? It's not that because AI is very interesting at the moment that we've applied it. We've always been applying it. And so it's a whole platform with different therapeutic modalities centered around RNA code. And so we're shooting our first shot, the first drug that we're developing, and we will see in the next 3 years what it could do. But it has multiple other drugs also in the pipeline that we're working on. So that's with the company. And in terms of the long-term vision, I really, at the same time as doing biotech and science and so forth, so on, for me, what's next in my mind is that when one has utilized his or her gift, so let us say maybe your gift is running and you've done it well, you've ran the marathon. You don't stop at the end and collect your medals and say, oh, thank you so much, I've done it. Yes, you collect your medals if you're fortunate enough to be on the podium, but you begin to think about the next generation and also the next young people who look like you that you need to inspire.
Sure.
And that you want to be better than you. And so I think for me, in terms of vision, what's next is exactly this. It's the idea that an MD, PhD, scientist, company founder who is Black or of African origin or African American shouldn't be rare. So that's what motivates me and inspires me at the next stage is that how do we collectively, that means you, me, Canisius, how do we collectively democratize tools and education and capabilities so that I'm not an anomaly? Right? I don't want to be an anomaly. So I want it to be that now we have mechanism and tools in place to really bring up the next generation, inspire them, and then have them do what I'm doing, but even in a better way. So that's what's next, and that's really what I'm excited to do. At the moment, I'm focused exactly on what I'm working on.
Sure.
But in my when I have time, I begin to start thinking about, okay, what does it look like? The next step of inclusion and bringing in others and empowering them.
I love hearing that. I mean, you talk about motivation and inspiring. You're motivating and inspiring me. And we at Canisius, it's a really, really interesting to have this job, to talk to alums who are in all walks of life. But the common thread through all of them is how they've sort of taken this idea of service and being a man and a woman for other people, and then making sure that that's part of their daily work life and daily personal lives. And I know for me as an alumnus, it's really motivating and inspiring to meet people like you who are taking that message, that thing that you internalized while you were here, and then it's still with you, whether it's 5 or 10 or 15, or in my case, 35 years later, and you're in your daily work. So thank you very much for sharing a little bit about what you're doing. I really look forward to hearing about all your successes in the coming years. And please make sure you come back to Canisius and visit us. And we're going to be, all of us are going to be very anxious to follow your career and the amazing things that you're doing, David. So thank you for spending the time with us today, and good luck.
A pleasure. Thank you so much.
See you soon.
All right. Bye-bye.